Welcome to Leadership Bites with myself, your host, Guy Bloom. This is a leadership podcast where I have conversations with colleagues, I chat with guests, and sometimes there'll be just me talking. You can connect with me at livingbrave.com, and when you enjoy the episode, subscribe and please tell everyone. So here we go for a very exciting episode for me of Leadership Bites. I've got 3 guests, which is a breakthrough moment. So I've got Sam Gilbert, Keith Ambrose, and Gemma Price in no particular order, and that's the way it rotates around on my screen. And I know who you are, and I'd just be great to get an introduction from the 3 of you, but this is all a catalyst for a program that we all shared together, possibly over a decade now. I know somebody's got the exact date. And just before we get into it, just, who are you and, what's the role you're in now? And we can kick off from there. So maybe, Sam, we can start with you.
Sure. So I'm Sam Gilbert. I'm a researcher at Cambridge University. I'm also an author of a book called Good Data, but I actually spent most of my career not in academia, but in the commercial sector, including at Experian, which we'll talk a bit about later.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sam. And Keith.
Hi, I'm Keith Ambrose. Underneath, I'm an accountant, but I spent 20 years at Experian in a variety of roles. And most recently, I've moved into the not-for-profit sector and returned to my bean counting profession.
Which does not do it the justice of keeping everybody where they should be. So thank you for that, Keith. And Gemma, thank you.
Hi, I'm Gemma Price, currently head of marketing at the Access Group, specifically looking at sort of people technology, so HR, payroll learning and compliance. Prior to that, did a bit of marketing consultancy and worked at Experian before that, which is where I met these gents and you, Guy, on the programme.
Right, brilliant. And you have the most awesome picture of a giraffe behind you, which I've just picked up on. Realised it's one of those ones that I've seen somewhere before and I love it. So compared to some of our bland backgrounds. So listen, let's just kind of pick up on the story. There was a bit of a catalyst here that I was going through LinkedIn, as I do on probably most days, and Sam, a picture popped up on my stream, and I can't remember the words exactly, but it was do you remember this? Or actually, hey, I went on this course. And maybe you could just bring to life that image and what was the motivation to put it on there. And then, of course, everybody, came in on the top of it and we ended up having this conversation, but it'd be great just to hear that.
Yeah, sure. So it actually started with me looking for a copy of my CV and using the terrible search function on my laptop to try and find it. And the CV I ended up opening turned out to be about 10 years out of date. And so I was just kind of glancing at this really out of curiosity to see what sort of nonsense I was writing in my CV 10 years ago. And in the kind of hobbies and other interests section, I'd written that one of my hobbies was teaching members of the local community about blogging. And so I thought, like, what on earth was I talking about? I don't remember this at all. But then I put a hyperlink in the CV, and when I clicked on the hyperlink, it took me to this blog that I then remembered having created as part of the community project that we did on this leadership program called Inspire at Experian. And so I then kind of fell down a bit of a rabbit hole, rereading the old posts on this blog about this community project to restore a pavilion so it could be a facility for the community to use. And one of these posts featured this photo. So this was a group photo of the cohort of us who had been on the Inspire leadership program. And what that did for me, I guess, was really bring back very vividly what it was like to be in Collick Hall, which was the hotel and conference centre where we did this conference, and to be in these sort of very powerful and memorable group sessions with the rest of the people in the picture. And so I just guess I wanted to put that out into the world and share it on and remind everybody else about that experience as well. And I think partly because I realised, almost on a daily basis, certainly every week, I think about or use one of the models or insights that I got from that program. So it's now, I think it was 2009 that we started this program. So what is that, 11, 12 years ago? And I'm still getting value from that almost every day.
It's like a flashback, isn't it? 2009.
Yeah.
If I even look at a picture of myself in 2009, I go, oh my God. You know,
Can't believe that many years have passed, to be honest. It's absolutely flown.
So, you know, that kind of brings us on really to the why I wanted to do this. So for anybody that doesn't know me or you're coming into the podcast, you know, obviously I deal with leadership development and executive development. And it was just a beautiful moment in my life when I was sort of sat there and, you know, I'm facing out into the world saying, hey, leadership development, executive development, you know, and of course, when then to see somebody that said, hey, I've got these memories of this thing that we did, you know, over a decade ago. And I think I wanted to pick up on, I said just before we started about my motivations, about the giving people a line of sight into when something's done right and it is of a certain quality, how, you know, there's training maybe for the situation in front of you. And then there's this kind of we almost want to call it, but this gift that is yet unknown that keeps on giving because you move forward with it. And Gemma, you mentioned just before we started this idea of the deeper program, and it may be just good to get your thoughts on either maybe it's the question or the observation just on how you reference that style and what it is. And of course we can all chip in on that, but it'd be great to hear from you on that.
Of course, yeah. So I think all of us have experienced at some point in our careers the usual kind of training sessions, programs, and probably have some kind of preconceived ideas when we go into a new program or session of some kind of about what that will, what that will constitute, what we'll get out of it, you know, whether we'll be fully engaged or it's just one of those things that's a tick box approach. And I think particularly with Inspire, initially, I think there was a bit of jostling around in terms of trying to put your finger on exactly what you were going to get out of this, what this thing was that didn't really have much of an agenda, this group of people that you'd never met before and how you were obviously going to find your place within that group. And it didn't take very long, you know, for us to find out within that first setup and that session that we had was that this was a very different approach to what I'd experienced before in terms of just going to that deeper level of development, of exploration, of, you know, arming you with skills that aren't just a tick box approach to enable you to do your job right now. And yes, it's the softer skills, but even further than that, it's not just work related, it's not just task or team related, it's actually about you as a leader and your makeup and how you perceive things and how you can be your authentic self and put that in any situation that you're in, whether that be a task, a team, a career, your family life or whatever. It was very obvious quite early on that this was a deeper level of investment that the company had committed to for us, and that it was very different to anything I'd experienced before.
Yeah, and I definitely pick up on that. And just as an observer, somebody that runs a program like that, it's sometimes an interesting at the pitch, you know. So what will we be getting out of this? And actually, when you're at the pitch, you go, hey, you can explain the short-term gains of knowledge and understanding and insight and calibration. But also when you say, hey, listen, you're also potentially giving people something that will be with them for the foreseeable future. And as I remember somebody when I was at that pitch going, what do you mean when they've left? I go, well, potentially, yeah. And, you know, that actually might not be a bad thing. And it's a very interesting thing to bring something to an organization, and for an organization to take on board. This is something that may actually go well beyond any value that we may even technically get from it. So, but actually what that means in terms of, you know, the short to mid term. But, you know, Sam, Keith, any kind of thoughts on, you know, Gemma's kind of thoughts there?
So just to add one thing maybe, which picks up also on what you said, Guy, which is that even though I left Experian a long time ago, so mid-2012, I think I left, I still have very positive feelings towards it as a company. And a lot of that, I think, is associated with the fact that it did this very important thing for my personal and professional development in allowing me to do that program. So I think that's an important thing for organizations to bear in mind, is that, yes, people are probably going to leave. Maybe some of them will leave because they have done that program and learned something new about themselves. But it's good karma, and that good karma is going to come back to you as well.
I like that idea. I talk about social responsibility as opposed to just corporate social responsibility. And, CSR might be, hey, we release you once a year to go and do something, tangible in the local community. But actually, if we are developing our people to be better in the world because they can listen more or give feedback better or whatever it is, so they're better in life, then actually maybe our relationship with the world, the footprint of it is far larger than just an overt demonstration of we're doing something locally. And that started to make more and more sense to me about how many people do you touch in a year? And then how many people, if you affect them or infect them, does that then mean when they go home? Take that over a working career. How many thousands of people are we touching by our influence? And when you think about putting 100 people through a program or whatever it might be, over a decade, that's a significant amount of people that an organization can be adding value to, I think, in the world. So I think that definitely resonates with me at a very personal level.
And I wouldn't underestimate the multiplier impact within the business itself, because, as you said, I can't remember how many went through that program, but it was a lot of people at that level. And even if 80% of them have moved on, they will have been there for a while, and they will have started to exhibit behaviours that their teams will have picked up on and will have learnt from, and it will have spread down through the organisation as well, and probably changed the culture. Whether they're still feeling an impact of it now, difficult to tell. But I certainly think it was a worthwhile investment for them as a business, as well as for individuals.
Do you remember how you got introduced to the program? Because I always, one of my biggest kind of anxieties is setting people up to succeed. And I was just running a program literally last week. And, again, we did all this work with the line managers, prepared them all. We've got 90 people coming on. We've had them in groups going through the program. And most of them had great conversations, but one fella turned up and he went, "Oh, my line manager, I got an email from HR telling me to turn up." I'm like, "Oh my Lord," they may have investment, but if you're not set up for these things properly, sometimes I think it doesn't help. And I just remember, do you ever remember how you were set up for it?
I do, actually. I remember my line manager at the time, Alistair, he had been on the programme, and I actually remember seeing a fundamental kind of shift in him, and also building of relationships with new people around the business that I would witness every now and then, and just they seemed to have like a deeper level of connection and camaraderie, and it changed the whole spirit and the feeling of the collaboration across parts of the team. So it obviously made me really curious to be able to observe that. And then I was, happy to be told that program had then been extended, and that I was going to be invited to have one of the hard fought places on the program. And because I'd seen changes, and he'd obviously not shared anything that had happened on the program, because obviously you have to experience it, otherwise if you can't experience it firsthand, then you lose some of that beauty in it. But I'd witnessed enough third hand to know that it was something powerful, and was excited that I was going to be able to find out, join the club and be part of this program that seemed to be doing great things, but wanted to experience it for myself.
Okay.
I think I was probably the opposite to that. I think I did get conscripted, and probably Sam was talking about it earlier about me questioning Paul at the start, and I think I probably was trying to understand. It doesn't matter how old you are, you always think you know everything, don't you? And it's only when you another 5 years down the line you realise you didn't, and then 5 years from today I realise how much I didn't know today. But I think at the time it hadn't been briefed well enough to me, and I went along expecting just another management development course, and what they're going to teach me this time that they didn't teach me at the last one.
How many feedback models can there be?
Well, yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I think as a mathematician, I'd like to feel the logic, and sometimes I think the thing with Inspire is it took a little while for me for all the pieces of the jigsaw to fit together. Okay, I'll get it now. And but as I said earlier, by the end of it, and ever since, there was so much of it that has stuck with me. And back to the previous point, I'm sure that I went out into and acted as a disciple within Experian I was there until 2016. And so there will have been plenty of direct reports and team colleagues that felt the impact of various models that I will have been either explicitly or otherwise sharing with them.
So Sam reminded me, so I co-facilitated that program. So I was running that as I ran the program. One of my key facilitators was Paul Dowding, and he was he's an integral part of that delivery team. And you shared a little story about, if you're happy to share it, about that kind of in the moment sort of way that Paul kind of helped kind of have a little bit of a mind shift for you. If you could share that would be I think great fun to hear.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, God, I think Sam should share this story.
Well, maybe I can start and you can pick it up, Keith, because I'm also really interested to hear.
Keith will sing it.
Yeah. So my recollection of this was it was at the beginning of the program, maybe even on the first day, and Keith, as you already alluded to, you were probably of the group the person who was most sort of challenging the facilitators in terms of like what value we were going to get from it. And we were doing some group exercise that was outside the lawn of the hotel, and Paul was leading this exercise, and then kind of Keith like chimed in with another sort of challenge of like why are we doing this? Like, is this really a good use of our time to be on a lawn doing something weird with a rope or whatever it was? And then
and blindfolds, I think you'll find.
You're right. Blindfolds.
Don't leave the blindfolds out.
Yes.
You've already got to be uncomfortable.
What goes on Inspire stays on Inspire.
Exactly.
So we'll draw a veil over the rope and the blindfolds. So Keith sort of challenges Paul on the usefulness of this exercise, and then Paul just like in this quite dramatic way just says, "Right, stop." And then he went and stood like right in front of Keith, like right kind of up close to him, and said, "Push me over." And then sort of got Keith to kind of try and like push him over by pushing him on the chest. And well, I don't know, maybe Keith, maybe you want to kind of take over at that point.
I think, yeah, I don't specifically remember what happened, except I do remember that he basically wasn't letting me push him over, and I think the point he was making was that instead of challenging, go with me on this, because as you say, I think he turned it from a shoving match into a waltz.
He took that energy and he took it into something positive that actually the two of you were engaged with.
Yeah, and this is exactly the image I most remember. Actually, was it had gone from this very sort of alpha masculine confrontational scenario into this sort of like rather beautiful waltz where Keith and Paul were waltzing towards the lake together, and they kind of they sort of disappeared from the group really, really fast. And it like suddenly really came to life that if you can like harness the energy that Keith was bringing in a different way, you could make loads of progress. So that really stuck with me.
Okay. So, and those are the moments, I guess, that, when you do programs like this, that it's risky for facilitators as well. It's very interesting that when you do this kind of work, we often say, you can do it, you can deliver training quite easy, just talk about what's on the slides, right? But if you're actually going to work with a group of people in a really adult way, then it puts the facilitator at risk, and it puts the program at risk, because very often when we're dealing with senior people, if they take umbrage, then it can go left instead of right really, really rather quickly. And if a group of people turn and don't want to play that game, then all of a sudden, What are we doing here? Are we trying to make it pleasant? Let's tell a load of jokes and make it quite easy, or are we trying to bring change into the room? And so that the subtlety of doing that is I think, sometimes that we sit with certain anxieties in the morning of going, right, how's this going to go? And that's always those memories are great ones. And for me, that kind of brings me on to the learning, and which is key. You can go on programs and you can learn a tool. If you want to give feedback, here's a 4-stage model or something like that. You can learn a mindset. Well, okay, while you're applying that tool, this is how you might want to frame it. That's the lens you might want to look through, and you can learn a behavior. It might be reinforcing or calibrating yours, but it's just while you're doing that thing, this is the experience people need to have of you, from maybe your physicality, your tone, your breathing, your etc. And even though there might be a mindset and a lens, that's also leading to your own kind of identity. And if your ego's in play, and what's the other person picking up, and how much do you care about what's going on for them? And there's lots of things going on there. So it's, how do you think it, when you look back, what was the journey there, and maybe how it kept on going? It's like is it a snowball that it just kept growing, or is it, no, I didn't really grow in more knowledge, but I just keep referring back to it? What's your experience been as you've gone through and forward?
So I'll go, shall I? So I suspect that there are lots of things that are subliminally buzzing around in my brain that I still, subconsciously refer to without realizing it. But there are 3 or 4 of the models that I was taught that I use both for myself and for colleagues ever since. And the one that sticks with me, I was never an office politician, and I'm still not. I don't find it easy, or I choose not to get involved in office politics. And I remember you saying to me, in one of our one-to-one sessions, that I was making life difficult for myself because I wasn't playing the game enough, and that I needed to find a compromise. When you're diametrically opposite to somebody, and you're trying to work with them, and you may have congruent goals, but your paths to get in there are different, and you're trying to work with them, that you have to change your stance a little bit in order to get them on side, and to ease your chances, or increase your chances of achieving your goal. And the illustration you used for it was a seesaw, and they've got the fulcrum, and then the seesaw, the plank was sat on top, and I'm right at one end, planted firmly on the ground because of my weight is holding it down, and basically I've now got uphill struggle with the person at the other end, and the analogy was that if I didn't if I just compromised my style a little bit and edged up the seesaw, it would start to bring it into balance. I wouldn't go past the fulcrum so much that I had compromised my own values and sort of them and made life difficult for myself in the other way, but to sort of balance the situation enough to make life easy for me, and I hold that in my head a lot. The present Mrs. Ambrose, who's
benefiting from that,
a clinical psychologist and has known me for 35 years, says that I'm somewhere on the spectrum, and so being emotionally aware of stuff isn't a strength. So, but having that image in my mind of just edging myself, if I can feel myself struggling to get somebody else on side with something, I just have to work out how I can edge up the seesaw and make life a bit easier for both of us. And I have used that model with staff who have come to me and said, oh, I can't get so and so, I can't get them to do what I want them to do or whatever, and I've used it. So that particular thing has definitely stuck with me for over a decade now.
There's two things I take from that. One is when you go on a program that gives you the appreciation that you need to marry a clinical psychologist to get through. that may be its own thing, but I also love the idea of the gift of passing it through to other people. And that's harder sometimes with more complex models, but what I would class as sticky content, stuff that, look, there's a seesaw, right? And when stuff that you can just offer to people, that again, I wonder how many people might, decades on from knowing you, go, well, I had a boss who actually, and I'm going to offer it to you. And it's like a baton that kind of goes on through time. And I find that fascinating.
And that was what I said earlier about the multiplier effect of some of this learning. It will definitely have cascaded around both within and without experience. Yeah. And back to so 2 tips: don't ever marry a clinical psychologist, because A, they know what you're thinking before you've thought it, and B, they're very intelligent, and it's not good.
Is that a cry for help, Keith? Thank you. And just for anybody else, just that the experience of just being on it, or what you took away, and how it's still adding value. It'd be great to hear what that might be.
For me, there's quite a few different points, actually. I think we've talked a bit about how it was very much a journey. So the fact that we had this investment from the organisation, which is so important, just in the programme, and the fact that it was a longer period of things, so you could kind of find your place in the group, get to know the group dynamics, the dynamics of the facilitators, and that kind of thing. So as time went on, I think it became more practical in terms of those things that you take away with you. But I think reflecting back on it, there were so many different things, and it's the most simple fundamental elements that really have stuck with me for this period of time. So things like, it's not all about me. So when there's something that you feel like you're in a bubble, all the attention's on you, you're not quite sure what to do as a leader, potentially, everyone else is potentially in that viewpoint as well from their own position. They're thinking it's about them, they're thinking about their fears, their anxieties, their worries, what they're going to do. Is everybody thinking about what they're doing? Well, actually, no. So it really helps you to nip that in the bud and think, when you start to worry about what everyone else is thinking or the decisions that you're making, it's not all about you. Everyone's got their own things to be thinking about, and everyone's in the same position and thinking through those same fears and anxieties and decision points. And that was one thing that I took away. Another thing was just around authenticity, and that for me was a really foundational point to all the other learnings that I took out of it. And I know that Sam will want to touch on some other ones that we've shared as well in the conversation earlier. But just being yourself and having that confidence to be yourself as a leader and be authentic and feel like you can bring your whole self to work. And I think over the last few months particularly, that's even resonated even more with me when, during lockdown, people are at home, you can't help but bring your whole self to work sometimes. You're constantly connected, you're on video conference, you don't suddenly get to have a pep talk with yourself and then step into a room. You're always on, you're connected, you've got additional challenges, which, you've got your deliveries coming, or the homeschooling, or the kids, or other things that are happening, or those days where you just don't feel like being on a video conference, but you need to bring your A game to work. So I think we've definitely become more human and more authentic just throughout that process, and having the comfort to do that, I think, is a really powerful thing for everybody.
I like that, Gemma. I think one of the things that I sometimes come to bring when I'm doing a sales pitch into an organization is I often get asked what's new. And I often go, do you know what? That's not really the right question. It won't be about what's new. It'll be about actually doing the things that might seem very basic and very, I wouldn't use the word low level, but just very human. So people are not, it's not about new models, though, of course, there's learning to be had. But if you don't get that foundation right and give people a sense of their own identity and what they're really about, then it is just training. It's just more tools. It has to sit on top of somebody's calibration of how they're going to apply them, not necessarily what they are, but what's the manner of me while I'm doing it. And sometimes, especially when I'm speaking to people a little bit more junior, they want to say to people who are going to be doing the development, this is why you should do it because it's new and it's innovative. Well, actually, that's not the reason they should be doing it. They actually need to probably look right back to that kind of sense of self, get that right, and then they can learn anything they want on top of it. And that's an interesting one that I think I'm hearing there, Gemma, if I've understood that correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's one of those things where you need those skills that, regardless of what situation you're in or what task you're facing, that you're able to come back to that center. You know, we talked a lot about our morals and what drives us and what sits well with you. I know I say to my teams a lot now when they're really, you know, overthinking things and trying to work out a particular example, you know, it has to fundamentally sit right with you and for you to feel that you're doing the right thing and making those decisions. And don't worry too much about the whole process and controlling the whole process. If you just do what you think is right and whatever option sits well with you, then you know that's the right way to go.
Yeah, awesome.
So the way that I
entirely.
sometimes...
Sorry, Sam, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Keith. I was just going to say, like, I sort of draw this distinction in my mind between things I learned from Inspire, which are like a Swiss Army knife. So I got this Swiss Army knife that's got a ton of different really useful tools that I've been able to apply in a whole range of different situations. So one that particularly resonated with me was this model called the Johari window, which is a 2x2 for thinking about how you can develop or how people in your team can develop. And I've used that like many times over the years. But I think, like, in addition to the Swiss Army knife and the new tools, there's also this thing that both Jam and Guy were speaking to just there, which is like there's things which I put in the category of like life philosophy. And I think what you said, Guy, is exactly right. Like, a lot of the best stuff is not new. It's profound, eternal truths about how humans feel most fulfilled and best relate to each other. And I think in that domain, like, a lot of what I learned on Inspire has been just generally useful to me in life, like not necessarily anything to do with a professional context, although it often is useful there as well. So one example of that would be just an instinct, or to try and control one's instinct to make judgments about other people. And instead, like, particularly if you are interacting with somebody who you find difficult and you don't like gel with, to like try and find a bit more compassion rather than just making kind of reflexive judgment and assuming that you're going to fundamentally disagree with them or that you don't like them. Just try and find the compassion to sense what's going on for them. I found that really, really important. And then I guess another thing that we also touched on before, and I think about regularly, is this question to oneself when facing any kind of decision in life, which we learned from the program, which, in your words, Guy, what would a good version of you do in this situation? Not a superhuman Mahatma Gandhi version of you, but a good version. And I just found that incredibly useful sort of maxim about moral courage. So any kind of decision, I just think that's such a fantastic question to ask oneself.
I love this, because I think what I have here is organizations often talk about talent and talent development, and of course there's, you know, the knowledge of the process, the product, the market. There's that kind of the doing part, and of course then there's the being part. And very often people get brought into an organization because the people that they've got in it that are doing it, they don't think they're able to be somebody that they want at that more senior level. And it's because they're not running programs or doing that development that is actually growing the human being. And we're not talking about, dancing around the mulberry bush and going on. We had some very complex, conversations that, touch people in different ways. But I think what I'm hearing from you there, Sam, is that, these things are, if we're going to do it right, you are developing the whole human being, not just showing them how to read a P&L, which is, perfectly right, because if you're not competent, you can't do the job. But that's what I'm hearing there. It's let's develop the whole human, and hey, we're still talking about it a decade later, if I've understood that correctly.
Yeah, I think that's a very good summary of it.
Absolutely, there's still place for the skills based training. That goes without saying. But I think it's that meeting of minds between employees, I guess, in an organisation around the investment from, it's not just monetary wise, it's time wise, it's commitment, it's really being 100% present in those situations to get as much out of it as you possibly can. And I think if you can try and get programs that develop the foundations and the fundamental sort of human side of it, as well as the skills-based stuff on top, I think you actually approach the skills-based things in a very different way, and can identify when you just need to get some skills done to do the job, at the same time as when you're developing things that will stay with you for a lot longer.
So listen, I'm alert to time. I'm always kind of thinking about respecting your time, but also people's listenability lengths when it comes to these things. Because with a beer and well, exactly, with a beer and a curry, we were sat around a table, we'd reminisce, to the point of no return. But so just on a personal note, first of all, just hey Sam, thanks for putting that image into the world, because the catalyst of something creates something else, right? So it fired me up to think and to reflect and to kind of go, why would I want to do this? And actually I think it's the message for me was for people that are looking at maybe being asked by their organization, would you want to invest in doing something that had some depth? There might be a fear, there might be an anxiety, but actually, that long-term value is there, and I've heard that. So thank you for that, and thank you, Keith and Gemma, for taking time out of schedules to contribute just your thoughts. And there doesn't have to be, but is there just any kind of just, I don't know, Guy, just before we go, something I'd like to say is, there doesn't have to be, but if there is, it would be a beautiful thing to hear.
So I think the benefit, and to use Sam's analogy, is that you're giving everybody the Swiss Army knife, and you might not see them using every tool every day, but if you've got everybody that's equipped to the same basic level, and that base is a high one, because the Swiss Army knife is the de facto of army knives, isn't it? So then you will gradually see the benefit of that across your whole organization, because you've generally just it's sort of if you only employ people with PhDs in your research team, then you'll have a bright research team, and if you're giving everybody the leadership equivalent of a Swiss Army knife, then you would hope that generally your quality of leadership, and therefore your overall staff well-being and morale will be uplifted along with it.
I might have that as my new strapline, actually. I'm going to go Living Brave Limited, the Swiss Army knife of something like that. I'm going to morph that into a T-shirt or something, on those lines.
Extra large one for me, please.
Boom. Sam, Gemma, just anything else from you that you would add value to the conversation?
I think Keith summed it up. Excuse me. I think Keith summed it up really well there. The only additional thing I'd say is just that it's a gift. Development is a gift both ways. So for people to be able to give to their employees, to colleagues, to anybody, any given time in the interactions that you have, I guess both at work and outside of work, but also for organisations to give in terms of programmes, and it will always resonate if you do it properly. It will always resonate further than you ever think it will. And yeah, just go for it if people have got the opportunity to do it.
Thank you, Gemma. Sam, anything from you? No need, but you started the whole thing, so maybe you should wrap it up.
Yes, so I guess maybe just a final thought for anybody who's listening or watching and is sort of contemplating investing in training and development. And this thought actually comes from a book called How to Be Strategic by a guy called Fred Pellard. And Fred in this book describes training as a no-regret move, which basically, to expand that a bit, means that if you invest in training, you will get a positive return in every single scenario. So sometimes the outcome of training is a little bit positive, but it can also be absolutely transformational. And there's actually very few other things, I think, as an organization that you can invest in that are no regret moves in that way. So, I hope some of this conversation today has maybe inspired people to, think about that and think about this as a transformational upside they could achieve.
Okay, Sam, Keith, Gemma, I'm going to press the stop button. We'll keep on just for a few more moments, but just on a personal note, and to, I'm sure anybody that's listening as well, who is either in the space of bringing development in, signing it off, or potentially, going on one, which is probably most people, then, I think this will have added to super value. So thank you. And I'm going to press the stop button. So thank you. That's it. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. Please share so others get to hear about us, and subscribe so you keep up to date on new episodes. Also visit livingbrave.com if you want to connect with me and find out more about executive coaching, team effectiveness, and changing culture. Oh, and of course you can buy my book Living Brave Leadership on Amazon. So on that note, see you soon.